The Arizona sun didn't forgive. It pressed down on dry mesa like a hand holding something underwater, and Vivian Hale felt every degree of it soaking through her black morning dress. The fabric clung to her back, her neck, the spaces between her fingers where she gripped the leather handle of her carpet bag. Everything she owned fit inside that bag. That should have felt light. Instead, it felt like proof. The train was already gone. She could still see the smoke trailing east, back toward Kansas, back toward the cemetery where she'd left Thomas 6 months ago. 6 months. Sometimes it felt like 6 years. Sometimes it felt like yesterday. "Ma'am?" She turned. The station manager stood in the doorway of his office, arms crossed, face set in that particular expression men wore when they'd made up their minds about a woman and didn't plan on changing them. "You can't stay here." "I know." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I just need a moment to—" "Now, ma'am." The words hit flat, final. Vivian looked down at the ticket in her hand. She'd bought it 3 weeks ago with the last money from selling Thomas's watch. The conductor had barely glanced at it before shaking his head. "Date's expired," he'd said. "You'll need to purchase a new one." When she'd explained that she didn't have money for a new one, that this ticket was supposed to be good for another week, he'd just shrugged. "Company policy, ma'am. Company policy." As if those 2 words could stand between a person and survival. "Is there a boarding house?" she asked. "Somewhere I could work for a room?" The station manager's expression didn't shift. "Mrs. Patterson's place is full up. Mining company brought in 30 men last week. You'd be wasting your time." "A church, then. Reverend's wife don't take in single women." He said it like he was reciting something memorized, like she wasn't the first desperate widow to ask. Causes talk. Causes talk. Vivian felt something cold settle in her chest despite the heat. She understood what he meant. A young widow, alone, needing charity, people would assume things. They always did. It didn't matter that Thomas had been dead for half a year, that she'd nursed him through fever until his last breath, that she'd sold everything including her mother's silver comb just to eat. None of that mattered. What mattered was appearance. And a woman alone had no good appearances left. "Then where exactly am I supposed to go?" The question came out sharper than she'd intended. The station manager uncrossed his arms. His hand moved to the doorframe, ready to close it. "That ain't my concern, ma'am, but you can't stay here." The door shut. Vivian stood there staring at the weathered wood, at the painted letters that read, "Office," at the space where a man had just been standing. Her hands were shaking. She realized she was holding her breath and forced herself to exhale. The platform stretched empty in both directions. Beyond it, dry mesa sprawled in a collection of sun-bleached buildings that looked like they were trying to disappear into the desert. She could see the saloon, the mercantile, a barber's pole striped red and white. Normal things. A normal town. Except she didn't belong in it. She sat down on her carpet bag because standing felt like too much work. The wood of the platform was hot enough to burn through her skirt, but she didn't care. Everything hurt anyway. Her feet hurt from walking. Her shoulders hurt from carrying. Her chest hurt from breathing. Mostly her chest. Thomas used to say she worried too much. "You'll figure it out, Viv. You always do." He'd said that the morning before the fever took him, his hand fever hot in hers, his smile weaker than it should have been, but still there. Still trying. She hadn't figured it out. She'd sold the house to pay his medical bills. Sold the furniture to pay for the burial. Sold everything else to buy a train ticket north to her cousin in Colorado because Margaret's last letter had said, "Come stay with us. There's room. You don't have to be alone." That letter was 8 months old. Vivian had written back twice with no answer. For all she knew, Margaret had moved, or changed her mind, or forgotten she'd offered, but it had been the only option that wasn't starving, and now it was gone too. "You look like you could use some water." Vivian's head snapped up. A woman stood at the edge of the platform, older, maybe 50, with gray streaking through dark hair pulled back in a simple knot. She wore a plain brown dress and carried a basket over one arm. Her face had the kind of lines that came from squinting into sun and smiling at the same time. "I'm fine," Vivian said automatically. "You don't look fine." The woman stepped closer. Not onto the platform, just to the edge of it, like she understood boundaries. "You look like somebody who just got left behind." The observation was so accurate it hurt. Vivian looked away. "The train wouldn't take me." My ticket expired. And you got no money for a new one. It wasn't a question. No. The woman was quiet for a moment. When Vivian glanced back, she was reaching into her basket. She pulled out a canteen and held it out. Go on. It's just water. Vivian hesitated. She'd learned not to trust kindness. It usually came with conditions. But her throat was so dry it ached, and the woman's expression held nothing but patience. She took the canteen. The water was warm but clean. She drank 3 long swallows before forcing herself to stop and hand it back. Thank you. You got people in Dry Mesa? No. Figured. The woman capped the canteen and tucked it back into her basket. Station manager already run you off? He said I can't stay here. He would. There was something knowing in the woman's tone, not quite sympathy, something harder. Man's got all the compassion of a railroad spike. You got anywhere else to go? Vivian looked down at her hands. I was trying to get to Colorado. My cousin lives there. I thought... Her voice cracked. She swallowed hard and started again. I thought I had enough for a ticket. But you didn't. No. Another silence. This one felt different, heavier. What's your name? The woman asked. Vivian Hale. I'm Sarah Chen. My husband runs the mercantile. She shifted the basket to her other arm. Listen, Vivian. I'd offer you work, but we can't afford extra help right now. Times are tight, and I'd offer you a room, but it would cause talk, Vivian finished. Sarah's mouth twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile. Yeah, it would. She paused, studying Vivian with sharp eyes. You got any skills? Anything you could trade? I can read. Write. I taught school back in Kansas before Thomas got sick. Before everything fell apart. Before I had to stop. Teacher, Sarah nodded slowly. That's good. That's worth something, though there ain't much call for it in Dry Mesa. Most folks keep their kids working. I understand. But, Sarah held up one finger. There might be something else. You willing to travel? The question caught Vivian off guard. Travel where? North. 3 days' ride into the mountains. There's a town up there called Pine Ridge. Small place. Ranching community. Friend of mine mentioned they've been looking for a school teacher for near about a year now. Can't find anybody willing to go that far into nowhere. Vivian's heart did something complicated in her chest. Hope and fear tangled together until she couldn't tell which was which. I don't have money for travel. I know. But the woman who runs the biggest ranch up there, Margaret Ashby, she's got resources. She might sponsor your trip if you're serious about teaching. Margaret Ashby? The name felt familiar, too familiar. You know her? Vivian shook her head. I had a cousin named Margaret, but she lived in Colorado, not Arizona. Sarah's expression shifted into something curious. Margaret Ashby used to live in Colorado. Moved here about 5 years back after her husband died. Started a cattle operation that damn near runs the whole county now. She tilted her head. What was your cousin's maiden name? Patterson. Margaret Patterson. That's her. Sarah's eyes widened slightly. Small world. She's your cousin? Vivian felt like the ground had just moved under her feet. I didn't know she was here. Her letters always came from Denver. Well, she ain't in Denver anymore, and if she's family, that changes things. Sarah looked back toward the town, then at Vivian again. There's a rider who works for her, comes through Dry Mesa every few weeks picking up supplies. He's due tomorrow morning. I could ask him to take a message up to Margaret, tell her you're here. Why would you do that? The question came out blunt, suspicious. Sarah didn't flinch. Because I've been where you are? Not exactly, but close enough. 10 years ago, I got off a train in a town that didn't want me with nothing but stubborn and a carpetbag. She gestured at the mercantile. Took me 5 years to build something, and I only managed it because one person decided I was worth the risk. She met Vivian's eyes. Maybe you're worth it too. Vivian didn't know what to say to that. Sarah didn't wait for an answer. You can sleep in the storage room behind the store tonight. It ain't comfortable, but it's dry and nobody will bother you. Tomorrow morning, if the rider shows up, I'll introduce you. What happens after that is between you and him. I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me yet. You ain't in Pine Ridge. Sarah turned to go, then paused. And Vivian, when you meet Rowan Creed, that's the writer. Don't expect charm. Expect honest. That man don't know how to lie even when he should. Then she walked away, her boots kicking up small puffs of dust with each step. Vivian sat alone on the platform as the sun continued its slow descent. Around her, Dry Mesa settled into evening routines. Lamps flickered on in windows. Voices drifted from the saloon. Somewhere a dog barked. Normal life. She pulled Thomas's photograph from her pocket, the small tin daguerreotype she'd carried since Kansas. In it, he was 22, smiling that crooked smile that always made her feel like everything would work out. He'd been wrong about that. But sitting here with his face in her hands, she couldn't quite hate him for it. "I don't know what I'm doing," she whispered to the image. The image didn't answer. She tucked it back into her pocket and stood, lifting her carpet bag. The storage room behind the mercantile smelled like coffee beans and dust, and the blanket Sarah gave her was threadbare, but it was shelter. It was something. That night, Vivian barely slept. Morning came too early and too bright. Vivian woke to the sound of wagon wheels on packed dirt and sat up so fast her head spun. The storage room was dim, lit only by cracks of sunlight between wallboards. She'd slept in her dress, she only had two, and she couldn't afford to wrinkle the better one, and now it was a mass of creases. She smoothed it as best she could, splashed water from the basin Sarah had left on her face, and tried to make her hair look like something other than a bird's nest. It didn't work. Her reflection in the small mirror above the basin showed a woman who looked exactly like what she was. Desperate. The door opened. "You decent?" Sarah's voice. "Yes." Sarah stepped inside, carrying a tin plate with bread and cheese. "Eat this. Rowan just rode in." Vivian's stomach clenched. "Already?" "Man's punctual, I'll give him that." Sarah set the plate down. "I told him about you. Told him you were Margaret's cousin. He said he'd wait while you eat, but don't take too long. He's got a 3-day ride ahead, and he likes to start early." "What did he say? About taking me north?" Sarah's expression was unreadable. "He said it wasn't his call. Said if Margaret wants you up there, he'll take you. Otherwise, he won't." "That's fair." "Fair or not, it means you got about 20 minutes to convince a man you never met to haul you into the mountains on the word of a cousin you ain't seen in years." Sarah headed for the door, then stopped. "He's waiting out front, and Vivian, don't try to charm him, just tell him the truth. That's all Rowan respects." Then she was gone. Vivian stared at the bread and cheese. Her appetite had vanished, but Sarah was right. She needed to eat. She forced down half the bread and drank water straight from the basin because her hands were shaking too hard to trust herself with a cup. Then she picked up her carpet bag and walked outside. The morning sun hit her like a slap. She squinted through it, one hand raised to shade her eyes, and saw him. Rowan Creed sat on the buckboard of a supply wagon 20 feet away, reins loose in his hands. He was older than she'd expected, maybe 35, maybe 40, hard to tell with men who spent their lives outdoors. His face was weathered in a way that spoke of wind and sun and long silences. Dark hair, longer than fashion, touched the collar of a work shirt that had seen better years. He wore no hat, and he was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Vivian walked toward him. Her boots sounded too loud against the dirt. When she reached the wagon, she stopped. "Mr. Creed?" "That's right." His voice was low, rough around the edges like gravel underfoot. "I'm Vivian Hale." Sarah Chen said, "I know what Sarah said." He shifted on the seat, looking her over with the same thoroughness a man might give a horse he was considering buying. Not cruel, just assessing. "You're Margaret's cousin." "Yes." "She know you're coming." "No." Vivian forced herself to meet his eyes. They were gray, she noticed, pale gray, like winter sky. "I wrote to her months ago. I never got a reply. I thought she was still in Colorado." Rowan was quiet for a moment. "Margaret don't get mail regular. Pine Ridge is far enough out that the postal service don't bother. Most communication goes through writers like me." He leaned back slightly. "So you got no way to know if she even wants you there?" "No," Vivian admitted. "I don't." "Then why should I take you?" The question was blunt. Not unkind, but not gentle either. Vivian swallowed. Sarah's words echoed in her head. "Just tell him the truth." "Because I got nowhere else to go," she said. "My husband died 6 months ago. I sold everything to pay his debts and buy a train ticket to Colorado, but the ticket expired and I don't have money for another one. Sarah said Pine Ridge needs a teacher. I am a teacher. Or I was before. Her voice caught. She steadied it. I can work. I can earn my keep. I just need someone to give me the chance. Rowan studied her. His expression still gave away nothing. You ever been on a 3-day wagon ride through mountain country? No. It ain't comfortable. Trail's rough. We'll be sleeping on the ground, eating what I cook, which ain't much. And if we run into trouble, weather, animals, whatever, you do exactly what I say without question. Understood? Vivian's heart was beating so hard she could feel it in her throat. Understood. And if we get to Pine Ridge and Margaret don't want you there, I ain't bringing you back. You'll figure out your own way from there. I understand. Another pause. This one stretched long enough that Vivian felt sweat prickling the back of her neck despite the morning cool. Then Rowan nodded once. Get in. Vivian almost didn't believe him. What? You want to ride north or not? Yes, but then get in. He gestured to the wagon bed behind him. Put your bag back there with the supplies. You can sit up front if you want, but the seat's only got room for one, so you'll have to ride in the back most of the time. Vivian didn't move. You're really taking me. I said I would, didn't I? But you don't even know me. No, Rowan agreed, I don't. But Sarah vouched for you, and I trust Sarah's judgment, and Margaret's a good woman who deserves to know her family's looking for her. He picked up the reins. Now get in before I change my mind. Vivian lifted her carpet bag into the wagon bed and climbed up after it. The wooden boards were hard and unforgiving, but she didn't care. Relief hit her so suddenly, she felt lightheaded. Sarah appeared from the mercantile carrying a wrapped bundle. Food for the road, she said, handing it up to Rowan. And Rowan? Don't let her fall off. Wasn't planning to. He secured the bundle with one hand. Thanks, Sarah. You're welcome. Sarah looked past him to Vivian. Good luck. Vivian wanted to say something meaningful, something that matched the magnitude of what this stranger had just done for her. But all that came out was, thank you. Sarah just nodded. Rowan clicked his tongue and the horses moved. The wagon lurched forward with a creak of wood and leather, and suddenly Dry Mesa was falling away behind them. Vivian twisted around to watch it shrink. The station, the mercantile, the platform where yesterday she'd sat convinced her life was over. It looked smaller from this distance. Everything did. She turned back around and settled against a sack of grain, her carpet bag tucked close. The sun climbed higher. The desert stretched in all directions, broken only by scrub brush and distant rock formations that shimmered in the heat. And ahead, somewhere beyond the horizon, the mountains waited. Rowan didn't speak. For the first hour, Vivian didn't either. She watched the landscape scroll past and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. She was gambling her life on the word of a woman she barely remembered, and the charity of a man who'd known her for 10 minutes. It was reckless. It was insane. It was the only choice she had. Can I ask you something? Her voice sounded strange after so much silence. Rowan didn't turn around. Go ahead. Why did you say yes? Really? His shoulders shifted, not quite a shrug. Told you already. Sarah trusts you. That's not a reason to take a stranger into the mountains, isn't it? No. Rowan was quiet for long enough that Vivian thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he said, 5 years ago, I got out of prison, served 18 months for theft. When I got out, nobody would hire me. Nobody would even talk to me except to tell me to move along. He paused. Margaret Ashby gave me work when I had nothing, didn't ask questions, didn't judge, just said if I was willing to work hard, she was willing to pay fair. Vivian absorbed that. You went to prison. Yeah, for theft. Yeah. She should have been afraid, should have demanded he stop the wagon and let her out, but something about the way he said it, flat, matter-of-fact, like he was stating the weather, made her believe him. Did you do it? She asked. Do what? Steal. Rowan turned then, just enough that she could see his profile. Yeah, I did. I was broke and desperate and stupid, and I stole from a man who didn't deserve it. He faced forward again. Did my time. Paid my debt. But that don't matter to most people. Once you got that mark, you got it forever. Margaret didn't see it that way. No. She didn't. His hands tightened slightly on the reins. So when Sarah tells me there's a woman who needs help and happens to be Margaret's family, I don't ask a lot of questions. I figure maybe I owe the world one good turn. Vivienne sat back. She understood now. This wasn't charity. It was balance, debt repaid. That made it easier somehow, cleaner. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I'm glad you said yes. Rowan didn't respond, but his shoulders relaxed just slightly. The wagon rolled on. By midday, the desert had transformed into something wilder. The flat scrubland gave way to rolling hills dotted with juniper and pinyon pine. The air changed too, still hot, but different, thinner, sharp with the scent of sage. They stopped once so Rowan could water the horses. Vivienne climbed down from the wagon bed, her legs stiff and aching, and stretched while Rowan worked. He moved with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times, checking harnesses, adjusting straps, speaking low words to the animals that she couldn't quite hear. You should drink, he said without looking at her. Vivienne realized she'd been standing there staring. She took the canteen he'd left on the seat and drank, careful not to take too much. How much farther today? She asked. Another 4 hours. There's a canyon up ahead with good cover. We'll camp there. And tomorrow? Mountains. He finished with the horses and straightened. Trail gets rougher. We'll have to go slow. Vivienne handed back the canteen. Can I ask another question? Seems like you're going to anyway. Fair enough. What's Pine Ridge like? Rowan considered that while he stowed the canteen. Small. Maybe 40 families. Most of them ranchers or loggers. Got a general store, a blacksmith, and a church that doubles as a meeting hall. He paused. Folks keep to themselves mostly, but they help when it matters. It's a good place if you don't mind quiet. I don't mind quiet. That's good, because you're going to get a lot of it. He climbed back onto the seat. Get in. We're losing daylight. They traveled in silence again, but it felt different now. Less like strangers and more like two people who decided not to waste words. The canyon Rowan had mentioned appeared just as the sun started to drop. Vivienne saw it first, a deep cut in the earth lined with red rock and scattered pines. He guided the wagon off the main trail and down a narrow path that made the wheels creak in protest. At the bottom, there was a clearing beside a thin stream. This is it, Rowan said, setting the brake. Vivienne climbed down. Her whole body ached. Her dress was covered in dust. But the air here was cooler, almost pleasant, and the sound of running water felt like relief. You can wash up downstream, Rowan said, already unloading supplies. I'll get the fire started. What can I do to help? He glanced at her. You know how to build a fire? Yes. Then go ahead. I'll handle the horses. Vivienne gathered kindling while Rowan unhitched the team. She'd learned fire building from her father years ago, back when camping had been an adventure instead of necessity. The memory ached, but her hands remembered the work. By the time Rowan returned, she had a small flame going. He nodded approval. Good, that'll save time. Together they worked to set up camp. It wasn't much. Bedrolls spread on opposite sides of the fire, a pot of beans warming over the flames, coffee brewing in a battered tin pot. But it was methodical, practical, safe. When the food was ready, Rowan handed her a tin plate and a spoon. It ain't fancy. I don't need fancy. Vivienne took the plate. The beans were plain but hot, and she was hungrier than she'd realized. They ate in silence. Darkness settled over the canyon. Above them, stars appeared, more stars than Vivienne had seen in months, bright enough to hurt. The fire crackled. The stream whispered over stones. Can I ask you something? Rowan's voice startled her. Yes. Your husband, how'd he die? The question should have felt invasive. Instead, it felt like he was trying to understand. Fever, Vivienne said. It started in his lungs and spread. The doctor said sometimes it happens that way. Fast. She stared into the fire. He was sick for 3 weeks, gone in 4. That's hard. Yeah. You loved him? Yes. The word came automatically. Then she hesitated. Though I don't know if that makes it harder or easier. Rowan poured himself more coffee. What do you mean? Vivienne hadn't meant to say it out loud, but now that she had, she found she wanted to finish the thought. I mean, She chose her words carefully. Thomas was a good man. He was kind, and he made me laugh, and I never doubted he loved me. But we only had 3 years together before he got sick, and I spent the last year of his life watching him die. She swallowed. So sometimes I wonder if I'm mourning him, or mourning the life we didn't get to have, if that makes sense. It does. She looked up. Rowan was watching her across the fire, his expression impossible to read in the flickering light. You lost somebody too, she said. Not a question. A long time ago. What happened? She left? Rowan set down his cup. Right after I got arrested. Can't blame her. I'd have left me too. Vivian wanted to say something, that she was sorry, that leaving wasn't the same as dying, something. But every phrase that came to mind sounded hollow. So instead she said, That must have hurt. Yeah, it did. Rowan stood, brushing dust off his pants. Get some sleep. We leave at first light. He walked to his bedroll and lay down with his back to the fire. Conversation over. Vivian finished her coffee and cleaned the dishes in the stream. The water was cold enough to make her fingers ache, but the work felt good, purposeful. When she returned to the fire, Rowan was already asleep, or pretending to be. She settled into her own bedroll and stared up at the stars. Tomorrow they'd reach the mountains. Tomorrow everything would change again. But tonight, lying here with the fire warm and the stars bright, and a stranger's kindness holding her life together, Vivian felt something she hadn't felt in months. Not quite hope, but close. The cold woke her. Vivian opened her eyes to pre-dawn gray and the sharp bite of mountain air against her face. The fire had died to ash. Across the clearing, Rowan was already up, moving quietly as he packed the wagon. He worked like someone who'd spent years trying not to wake people. Efficient, almost silent. She sat up, her body protesting every movement. Sleeping on the ground had left her stiff in places she didn't know could get stiff. Coffee's ready, Rowan said without looking at her. And there's bread in the pack if you want it. Vivian pushed herself to standing and immediately regretted it. Her back seized. She bit down on a gasp and forced herself to walk to the fire anyway, because showing weakness felt dangerous, even though she couldn't say why. The coffee was strong enough to strip paint. She drank it anyway. How'd you sleep? Rowan asked. Fine. He glanced at her then, one eyebrow raised. You're a terrible liar. I slept, Vivian corrected. That's what matters. Fair enough. He tied down the last of the supplies and dusted off his hands. We got about an hour before sunrise. I want to be moving by then. Trail's easier in good light. Vivian drank more coffee and tried to wake her brain up enough to function. Around them, the canyon was still caught in that strange half-light before morning, all shadow and suggestion. Birds were starting to call, sounds she didn't recognize, sharper and wilder than anything back in Kansas. Can I ask you something? She said. Rowan poured himself coffee. You ask a lot of questions. Is that a problem? No, just an observation. He leaned against the wagon. Go ahead. Yesterday you said Margaret runs a cattle operation. How big? Big enough to matter. She's got about 3,000 head spread across the valley, plus contracts with 2 railroad companies for beef supply. He paused. She started with nothing, bought the land cheap after her husband died, hired good men, and built it into something that scares the competition. Scares them how? She's better at it than they are. And she's a woman doing it, which makes some folks uncomfortable. Rowan's mouth twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. Margaret don't care much about making folks comfortable. Vivian tried to square that image with the cousin she remembered. A girl barely older than herself, quiet and serious, who'd left Kansas to get married when Vivian was still in braids. That Margaret had been soft-spoken, careful. This one sounded like something else entirely. What happened to her husband? Vivian asked. Kicked by a horse. Died 2 days later. Rowan said it matter-of-fact the way he said everything. That was 6 years back. She took over the ranch and never looked back. Did they have children? No? The single word carried weight. Vivian didn't push. They finished their coffee in silence, cleaned up the camp, and got moving just as the sun broke over the canyon rim. The light came all at once, gold spilling across red rock, turning everything sharp and vivid. Vivian climbed into the wagon bed and settled against the supply sacks. Her whole body ached, but the morning air was clean and cold in a way that felt good once she got used to it. The trail climbed. For hours, they moved steadily upward through country that shifted with every mile. The juniper gave way to pine. The air got thinner. The temperature dropped enough that Vivian had to pull her shawl tight around her shoulders. And Rowan didn't speak. He just drove, his attention on the horses and the trail, occasionally making small adjustments to their course, but otherwise silent. At first, Vivian thought he was being rude. Then she realized he wasn't being anything. This was just how he was. Quiet. Present, without needing to fill the space with words. It should have been uncomfortable. Instead, it felt oddly restful. Around midday, they stopped to water the horses at a stream that cut across the trail. Vivian climbed down, wincing as her legs remembered they existed, and walked to the water's edge. The stream was clear enough to see the stones at the bottom, smooth river rock in shades of gray and brown. "Go ahead and drink," Rowan said behind her. "It's clean." She knelt and cupped her hands, bringing the ice-cold water to her mouth. It tasted like minerals and distance. When she stood, Rowan was watching her with that assessing look again. "What?" she asked. "You're tougher than you look." "I don't know if that's a compliment." "It is." He handed her a piece of jerky from his pack. "Most city folks would have complained by now about the cold or the trail or sleeping on rocks. You just do what needs doing." Vivian took the jerky. "I learned a long time ago that complaining doesn't change anything." "No. But most people don't figure that out until they're older." "I'm 24, Vivian said. "How old do I need to be?" Rowan's mouth did that almost smile thing again. "Fair point." They ate standing by the stream, watching the horses drink. The mountains rose ahead of them now, real mountains, not the rounded hills of yesterday. Pine-covered slopes climbing into peaks still touched with snow despite the season. "That's where we're going?" Vivian asked, nodding toward them. "That's where we're going." "How much farther?" "Rest of today and most of tomorrow. We'll camp tonight at a place called Widow's Point. There's a shelter there, nothing fancy, but it's got a roof and walls." He glanced at the sky. "Weather looks clear, but it can change fast up here. Best to have cover just in case." Vivian tried not to think about what weather changing fast meant in the mountains. She'd heard stories about sudden storms, travelers caught in snow, bodies found weeks later frozen solid. "You ever lost anyone up here?" The question came out before she could stop it. Rowan's expression shifted. Not closed exactly, but careful. "Once. Long time ago. Man got caught in an early blizzard, thought he could push through. We found him 3 days later." He paused. "That's why I don't take chances with weather, and why you'll do what I tell you if things get bad." "I will." "You say that now." "I mean it." Vivian met his eyes. "I'm not stupid enough to think I know better than you about surviving out here." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Good. Let's move." They traveled through the afternoon as the trail grew steeper and the trees closed in on either side. The wagon creaked with every jolt, and Vivian had to brace herself against the sides to keep from being thrown around. Her hands were already blistered from gripping the rough wood. But she didn't complain. The sun was dropping toward the western peaks when Rowan finally pulled off the trail into a small clearing. Vivian saw the shelter immediately, a rough structure built against a rock face, 3 walls of stacked stone and a slanted roof of wooden planks covered with pine boughs. "Widow's Point," Rowan said. "Named for a woman who lived here alone for 2 years after her husband died in a mining accident. She finally moved to Pine Ridge, but the shelter stayed." Vivian climbed down from the wagon. "What was her name?" "Don't remember. Everybody just called her the Widow." He started unhitching the horses. "There's a fire pit inside and dry wood stacked along the back wall. Get a fire going while I deal with the animals." Vivian grabbed her carpet bag and headed for the shelter. The inside was dim and smelled like old smoke and pine sap, but it was dry and out of the wind. Someone had left a stack of reasonably straight wood against the far wall, along with a rusty pot and a few dented tin cups. She built the fire carefully, the way her father had taught her, kindling first, then larger pieces arranged so air could flow. It caught on the second match, which felt like a small victory. By the time Rowan came inside carrying supplies, she had a decent blaze going. "Good," he said, setting down a sack of potatoes and some dried meat. We'll eat better tonight than we did yesterday. There's a root cellar behind the shelter. Keeps things cool. Whoever built this place knew what they were doing. They worked together to prepare the meal. Rowan sliced potatoes while Vivian filled the pot with water from the stream outside. The rhythm felt familiar in a way she couldn't quite name. Two people sharing work without needing to discuss who did what. When the stew was bubbling over the fire, they sat on opposite sides and waited for it to cook. The shelter was small enough that they were only a few feet apart. Close enough that Vivian could see the scar on Rowan's left hand, a pale line running from his thumb to his wrist. "Can I ask how you got that?" She gestured to his hand. Rowan glanced down. "Fight. Long time ago." "Before or after prison?" "Before. Part of why I ended up there, actually." He flexed his fingers, studying the scar like he was seeing it for the first time. "I was working on a ranch down south. Another hand started trouble, said I'd stolen from him. I hadn't, but he wouldn't let it go. Finally, it came to fists." He paused. "He pulled a knife. I took it away from him. In the process of taking it away, I broke his arm." "That sounds like self-defense." "It was, but the ranch owner didn't see it that way. And when money went missing a week later, I was the easy target." Rowan's voice stayed flat, factual. "I didn't steal that money, but I couldn't prove I didn't, and I had a reputation for fighting, so the judge believed the ranch owner." 18 months. Vivian absorbed that. "The real thief never got caught?" "Oh, he got caught. 6 months after I got out. Turned out it was the ranch owner's son." Rowan stirred the stew. "By then I'd done my time, and nobody cared about making it right." "That's not fair." "No, it's not." He looked at her across the fire. "But fair and real are two different things. You learn that quick when the law decides you're disposable." The bitterness in his voice was quiet but unmistakable. Vivian thought about all the times people had told her to accept things as they were. Thomas's death, the debts, the expired ticket, as if acceptance was the same as dignity. "I'm sorry that happened to you," she said. "Don't be. I survived it." Rowan tested the stew with a spoon, then ladled some into 2 cups. "And it taught me who I could trust. Turns out that's a short list." He handed her a cup. The stew was simple: potatoes, dried beef, herbs she couldn't name, but it was hot and filling. They ate in comfortable silence. Outside, night settled over the mountains. Through the open doorway, Vivian could see stars appearing one by one, brighter than they'd been in the canyon. The air smelled like pine and wood smoke and cold. "Tomorrow we'll reach the high pass," Rowan said. "It's the hardest part of the journey. Steep trail, narrow in places. We'll have to take it slow." "How long will it take?" "Most of the morning, but once we're through, it's downhill to Pine Ridge. We should arrive by late afternoon." Vivian's stomach tightened. Tomorrow. She'd be there tomorrow. She'd see Margaret and find out whether this gamble had been worth it or if she'd just traded one kind of stranded for another. What if she doesn't want me there? The question came out quieter than she'd intended. Rowan looked at her. "Then you figure something else out." "That's not very reassuring. I'm not here to reassure you. I'm here to get you there." He set down his empty cup. "But for what it's worth, Margaret's not cruel. If she can't keep you on, she'll at least make sure you're not left worse off than you started." "You believe that?" "I know that. I've seen her help people she had no reason to help. She's hard, but she's not heartless." He paused. "And your family, that'll matter to her." Vivian wanted to believe him, but belief felt dangerous when so much was riding on it. She finished her stew and cleaned the cups in the stream while Rowan banked the fire. When she came back inside, he was already settling into his bedroll near the wall. "Get some sleep," he said. "Tomorrow's going to be long." Vivian lay down on her own bedroll and pulled her shawl tight around her shoulders. The shelter was warmer than sleeping outside had been, but the cold still seeped up from the stone floor. She stared at the ceiling, rough planks darkened by years of smoke, and tried not to think about tomorrow. But sleep was a long time coming. Morning arrived gray and cold, the sky heavy with clouds that hadn't been there the night before. Rowan stood outside the shelter studying the weather with a frown. "Storm's coming," he said when Vivian joined him. "Not today, but soon. Day or two, maybe." "Will we make it to Pine Ridge before it hits?" "Should, but we need to move." He was already loading the wagon, his movements faster than usual. Eat something quick. We leave in 10 minutes. Vivian forced down bread and cold water, then helped him finish packing. Within 15 minutes, they were on the trail again, climbing steadily through pine forest so thick it blocked most of the light. The higher they went, the colder it got. Vivian wrapped her shawl over her head and tried to ignore the way her fingers were going numb. The trail had narrowed to barely wider than the wagon, with steep slopes falling away on one side and rock faces rising on the other. "Don't look down," Rowan called back. Too late. Vivian had already looked. The drop beside them went down at least 30 feet to a boulder field that looked perfectly designed to kill anyone who fell. She pressed herself against the supply sacks and focused on breathing. The wagon creaked. One wheel hit a rock, and the whole thing lurched sideways. Vivian grabbed the side rail with both hands, her heart hammering. "Easy." Rowan's voice was calm, steady. "We're fine, just a bump." But his shoulders were tight, and he was gripping the reins harder than usual. They climbed for what felt like hours. The pass opened ahead of them, a gap between two peaks where the trail leveled briefly before starting the descent. When they finally reached it, Rowan pulled the horses to a stop. "We'll rest here," he said. "Let the animals breathe." Vivian climbed down on shaking legs. Her whole body was rigid from holding on so tight. She walked a few steps away from the wagon and looked out over the valley spreading below them. It was breathtaking. Pine forest stretched as far as she could see, broken by meadows and the silver thread of a river cutting through it all. In the distance, she could make out a cluster of buildings, tiny from here, but unmistakably a town. "That's Pine Ridge?" she asked. Rowan came to stand beside her. "That's it." It looked so small, so isolated, like something that existed in a different world from the one she'd left behind. "It's beautiful," she said. "It is." Rowan was quiet for a moment. "But it's hard, too. Winters are brutal. Supplies run low. People die from things that wouldn't kill them in a city with doctors and medicine." He glanced at her. "You sure you want this?" Vivian thought about Dry Mesa. About that train station platform. About the station manager closing the door in her face. "I'm sure," she said. They rested for 20 minutes, then started the descent. Going down was somehow worse than going up. The wagon wanted to roll faster than the horses could control it, and Rowan had to keep the brake engaged most of the time. The wheels screamed in protest. The smell of burning wood filled the air. Vivian held on and prayed they wouldn't tip. They didn't. By early afternoon, the trail leveled and widened, turning into something that almost resembled a road. The trees thinned. Vivian could see open sky again. And then, rounding a bend, she saw the town. Pine Ridge sat in a valley where 3 streams met, surrounded by meadows and backed by forest. The buildings were rough, log construction mostly, with a few painted storefronts along what looked like a main street. Smoke rose from chimneys. Horses stood tied to hitching posts. It looked real. It looked like somewhere people actually lived. "Almost there," Rowan said. Vivian's hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't from cold. They rolled into town just as the sun broke through the clouds. A few people stopped to watch them pass, a woman hanging laundry, 2 men outside the blacksmith shop, children playing in the street. Their faces showed curiosity, but not hostility. Rowan guided the wagon down the main street and turned onto a side road that led out of town toward a large structure in the distance. As they got closer, Vivian saw it was a ranch house. 2 stories, painted white, with a wide porch and corrals spreading behind it. A woman stood on the porch. Even from a distance, Vivian recognized her. Margaret, older now, her hair more gray than brown, but unmistakably the cousin she remembered. Tall, straight-backed, watching their approach with eyes that gave away nothing. Rowan pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house. "We're here," he said. Vivian climbed down. Her legs were unsteady. Her dress was covered in dust. She probably looked like something dragged behind the wagon rather than riding in it. Margaret descended the porch steps slowly. She wore practical clothes, pants and a work shirt, and moved with the kind of careful deliberation that came from old injuries or long habits. She stopped a few feet away and studied Vivian in silence. Then she said, "You look like your mother." Vivian's throat tightened. "Margaret." "Vivian." Margaret's expression didn't change. Rowan sent word you were coming. He said you needed work. I do. I'm a teacher. Or I was. I know what you can do. Sarah Chen's telegram was very thorough. Margaret glanced at Rowan. You make good time. Good enough? Storm's coming, though, day or two out. Figured as much. Margaret turned her attention back to Vivian. You hungry? The question was so ordinary it threw her. Yes, a little. Then come inside. We'll talk over food. Margaret headed for the house without waiting for an answer. Vivian looked at Rowan. He just nodded toward the door. She followed Margaret inside. The house was warm and smelled like bread baking. The main room was large and practical, furniture that prioritized comfort over style, a stone fireplace, windows that let in good light. A woman in an apron appeared from what looked like a kitchen. Rosa, set 2 more places, Margaret said, and bring coffee. Yes, ma'am. Margaret gestured to a table by the window. Sit. Vivian sat. Her whole body felt strange, too light and too heavy at the same time. Margaret settled across from her and studied her with pale blue eyes that saw too much. Your mother was my father's sister. We were close when we were young, before I got married and moved away. She wrote me when you married, said you seemed happy. I was. And then? He died, fever, 6 months ago. Margaret nodded slowly. Sarah's telegram said you were widowed and broke. That true? Yes. No other family? No. Skills besides teaching? I can keep house, cook. I'm decent with numbers. Vivian's hands twisted together in her lap. I can work hard. I just need the chance. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Rosa brought coffee and bread with butter, then disappeared again. Pine Ridge needs a teacher, Margaret finally said. We've needed one for over a year. Last one we had lasted 2 months before she decided isolation wasn't for her and left on the next supply wagon. She picked up her coffee. Position pays $30 a month plus room and board. You'd live in the schoolhouse. There's a room in back. It's not much, but it's private. Vivian's heart was beating so hard she could feel it in her ears. You're offering me the job? I'm offering you a trial. 3 months. If you can handle it, the work, the isolation, the winter, then the position's yours permanent. If you can't, I'll pay your way to wherever you want to go next. Margaret's expression was unreadable. But I need to know now if you're serious, because if I put you in front of those children and you run after a month, it'll hurt them, and I won't have that. I won't run, Vivian said. You say that now. I mean it. Vivian leaned forward. I have nowhere else to go. No money, no prospects. This is it for me. So if you're willing to take a chance, I swear I'll make it work. Margaret studied her. The silence stretched until Vivian thought she might scream. Then Margaret held out her hand. 3 months, starting Monday. Vivian shook it. Margaret's grip was firm and calloused and real. Thank you, Vivian managed. Don't thank me yet. You haven't seen the schoolhouse. Margaret stood. Finish your coffee. I'll have Rowan take you into town and show you where you'll be living. She left the room before Vivian could respond. Vivian sat alone at the table, staring at her hands. They were still shaking. 3 months. She had 3 months to prove she belonged here. It would have to be enough. The schoolhouse sat at the edge of town, a 1-room log building with a crooked chimney and windows that didn't quite fit their frames. Rowan pulled the wagon to a stop in front of it and gestured. There it is. Vivian climbed down and walked to the door. It was unlocked. Inside, the room was bigger than she'd expected, maybe 20 feet by 30, with rough wooden benches for students and a desk at the front that had seen better decades. A blackboard hung on one wall, cracked down the middle but still usable. And in the back corner, behind a curtain, she found the living space Margaret had mentioned. A narrow bed, a small stove, a table with 1 chair, a trunk for clothes. It was barely bigger than a closet. It was hers. Vivian sat down on the bed, and it creaked ominously. She tested it carefully. The frame was solid enough, but the mattress had definitely hosted mice at some point. It needs work, Rowan said from the doorway. Vivian looked up. It needs everything. Probably. He stepped inside, looking around with a critical eye. But the bones are good. Roof solid. Chimney draws clean. I can see from the bricks. You get a fire going in here, it'll warm up fine. Have you seen the windows? I've seen them. I'll fix them tomorrow. Vivian blinked. You will? Margaret'll pay me for it. She always makes sure the school's livable. Rowan crossed to the stove and opened it, checking inside. This needs cleaning, but it'll work. You know how to manage a wood stove? Yes. Good. I'll bring wood tomorrow when I come to fix the windows. He straightened and looked at her. You'll be all right here? It was the first time he'd asked her that directly. Vivian looked around the shabby little room that was now hers and felt something complicated twist in her chest. I'll be all right, she said. Rowan nodded. I'll bring your bag in. He left and returned a moment later with her carpet bag. He set it on the trunk and hesitated, like he was trying to decide whether to say something. What? Vivian asked. Nothing, just... He shifted his weight. Town's small. People talk. You being a widow and living alone, there'll be gossip. I know? Don't let it get to you. Most of it's just boredom dressed up as concern. He moved toward the door. And if anybody gives you real trouble, you tell me or Margaret. Understood? Why would you care? The question came out sharper than she'd meant it. Rowan stopped, turned back. Because I know what it's like to be judged before people know you. And because Margaret trusts you, which means I do too. He paused. And because I figure you've had enough hard times without adding unnecessary ones. Something in Vivian's throat tightened. Thank you, she said quietly. Rowan nodded once, then left. Vivian sat alone in her new home and listened to the wagon pull away. Outside, Pine Ridge settled into evening. She could hear voices in the distance, the sound of someone chopping wood, a dog barking. Normal sounds. A normal town. She stood and walked to the window. Through the gap in the frame, she could see the street, dusty and quiet in the fading light. A woman walked past carrying a basket. 2 children ran by chasing something Vivian couldn't see. Life. Real life happening all around her. And somehow, impossibly, she was part of it now. Vivian turned back to survey her new kingdom. The shabby room, the crooked chimney, the bed that creaked. It wasn't much, but it was hers, and for the first time in months, that felt like enough. She unpacked her carpet bag slowly, putting her few possessions in the trunk. 2 dresses, extra stockings, her hairbrush. The tin photograph of Thomas, which she set on the small table and stared at for a long moment. I made it, she told the image. I don't know if this was what you'd have wanted for me, but I made it. Thomas's frozen smile didn't answer. Vivian covered the photograph with a handkerchief and turned away. Tomorrow she'd clean, she'd explore the town, she'd figure out what teaching here would actually mean. But tonight, she let herself feel the weight of the last 3 days lift. She'd survived the journey. She'd found Margaret. She had a job, a home, a chance. Outside, the first stars appeared over Pine Ridge, and inside her crooked little schoolhouse, Vivian Hale allowed herself to believe, just for a moment, that maybe, possibly, she was going to be all right. The morning light came through the gaps in the window frames like accusations, highlighting every crack and stain in the schoolhouse. Vivian woke stiff and cold, her breath visible in the air. The stove had gone out sometime in the night. She forced herself out of bed and into her dress, fingers clumsy with cold as she worked the buttons. Her reflection in the small mirror above the wash basin showed a woman who looked older than 24, dark circles under her eyes, hair a mess, skin pale from exhaustion. She splashed icy water on her face and tried not to think about how Thomas used to tell her she was beautiful in the mornings. Outside, Pine Ridge was already awake. She could hear wagon wheels, voices calling to each other, the rhythm of hammers from somewhere nearby. A working town. People with purpose. She needed to find hers. The main room of the schoolhouse looked worse in daylight. Dust covered everything. The benches had initials carved into them, generations of bored children leaving their marks. The blackboard was so faded she could barely make out the ghost of whatever lesson had been written there last. Vivian found a broom in the corner and started sweeping. The work felt good, purposeful, achievable. She could fix dust. She could fix dirt. She was halfway through when the door opened. A woman stood in the doorway, younger than Vivian, maybe 20, with red hair pulled back in a braid and freckles scattered across her nose. She carried a basket covered with a cloth. "You're the new teacher," the woman said. not a question. Yes, Vivian Hale. Anna Morrison. I run the general store with my husband. She stepped inside, looking around with a critical eye. Place looks like hell. Vivian stopped sweeping. It does. Last teacher didn't clean worth a damn before she left, just packed up and ran. Anna set the basket on the teacher's desk. I brought you some things, coffee, bread, eggs. Figure you didn't have time to shop yet. Thank you. I don't have money right now, but once Margaret pays me, it's not charity. Margaret already paid me. Anna pulled back the cloth, revealing the food. She does this for every new teacher, says it's an investment in making sure you don't starve before classes start. Vivian looked at the basket. Real food, more than she'd seen in months. That's kind of her. Kind's not the word I'd use for Margaret Ashby, but she's fair. That counts for more. Anna leaned against the desk. You really planning to stay? I'm planning to try. That's not the same thing. No, Vivian agreed. It's not. Anna studied her for a moment. You know how many teachers we've had in the last 5 years? No. 7. Longest any of them lasted was 4 months. Most left after 6 weeks. She crossed her arms. Kids here are good kids, but they're rough. Half of them have never been in a real school before. And winter's hard. Real hard. Last teacher left in January swearing she'd rather die than spend another month in this town. Vivian set down the broom. Why are you telling me this? Because I got a 6-year-old daughter who deserves better than learning her letters from me when I got time between running a store and keeping a house and trying not to lose my mind. Anna's voice was sharp. And I'm tired of watching teachers show up full of hope and leave full of excuses. I'm not going to leave. You say that now. I know. Vivian cut her off. Everyone keeps saying that, but I mean it. I have nowhere else to go and nothing else to do. So unless this town physically throws me out, I'm staying. Anna's expression shifted slightly. Not quite a smile, but something close. All right then. She pushed off the desk. Classes start Monday. You'll have about 15 students, ages 5 to 14. Some of them can read a little. Most can't. None of them know math past basic counting. She headed for the door, then stopped. And Vivian, if you need anything, supplies, help, someone to complain to, come find me. Store's on Main Street. Can't miss it. Thank you. Anna left without another word. Vivian stood alone in the dusty schoolhouse and felt something loosen in her chest. Not hope exactly. Something more practical. Possibility. She went back to sweeping. By noon, the place looked almost inhabitable. She'd swept, scrubbed the benches, cleaned the blackboard until her arms ached. The windows still didn't fit right and the chimney still looked crooked, but at least it was clean. She was washing her hands in the basin when someone knocked. It's open, she called. Rowan stepped inside carrying an armload of wood. Brought this for your stove, and I got tools in the wagon for those windows. Vivian dried her hands. You didn't have to come today. Margaret's paying me to fix this place. Might as well do it while I'm in town. He set the wood down by the stove and looked around. You cleaned. I had to. It was disgusting. Fair enough. He walked to the first window and pulled a measuring tape from his pocket. These frames are shot. I'll need to rebuild them from scratch. How long will that take? Rest of today, probably. Maybe tomorrow morning. He made a note on a piece of paper. You got somewhere else to be? No. Then you can help if you want. Hold things while I work. It wasn't really a question, but Vivian nodded anyway. All right. They worked through the afternoon. Rowan measured and cut while Vivian held boards in place and handed him tools when he asked. He worked with the same quiet efficiency she'd noticed on the trail. No wasted movement, no unnecessary talk. But it wasn't uncomfortable. Around mid-afternoon, a girl appeared in the doorway. She looked about 13, thin and serious, with dark hair and darker eyes. She stood watching them without speaking. Can I help you? Vivian asked. The girl shifted her weight. Are you the teacher? I am. My ma said I should come introduce myself. I'm Clara Bennett. Vivian climbed down from the bench she'd been standing on. It's nice to meet you, Clara. Will you be in class on Monday? I guess. Clara looked around the room. You really going to stay? That's the plan. The last teacher said that too. Then she left after it snowed. Clara's voice was flat, matter of fact. She said teaching here wasn't worth the trouble. Vivian felt anger flare in her chest, not at Clara, but at a woman she'd never met who'd looked at these children and decided they weren't worth her time. "I'm not her," Vivian said. "We'll see." Clara turned to go, then stopped. "You should know most of the kids can't read, and some of them don't see the point in learning. Their folks need them working. I'll deal with that when it comes." Clara studied her with eyes too old for her face. "You really think you can teach us anything?" "I think I can try. Whether you learn is up to you." Something flickered across Clara's expression. Not quite respect, but not dismissal either. "Monday, then," Clara said, and left. Rowan had stopped working and was watching Vivian. "That was good." "What was?" "How you handled her. Most teachers try too hard to be liked. Makes the kids smell weakness." He picked up his hammer again. "You just told her the truth. She'll respect that." Vivian went back to holding the board in place. "You think she's right? That most of them don't see the point in learning?" "Some of them, yeah. Hard to care about reading when you're worried about whether your family's going to eat next winter." Rowan positioned a nail and drove it home with 3 sharp strikes. "But that doesn't mean they shouldn't have the chance." "No, it doesn't." They worked in silence for a while. Outside, the afternoon light started to fade. Vivian's arms ached from holding boards and her back hurt from standing, but the windows were taking shape, straight frames that actually fit, glass that didn't rattle in the wind. "You're good at this," she said. Rowan didn't look up. "At what?" "Building things, fixing things. Had a lot of practice." He measured another board, marked it with a pencil. "Spent most of my time in prison working in the carpentry shop. Guard who ran it was fair, said if we were going to be locked up, might as well learn something useful." He cut the board with smooth, practiced strokes. "Turns out I'm better at making things than I am at most everything else." "That's not nothing." "No, it's not." He fit the board into place and looked at her. "What about you? You always want to be a teacher?" Vivian thought about it. "I don't know if I wanted it. It just made sense. I was good at reading, good at explaining things. My father encouraged it." She paused. "And it was respectable. Women can teach. That was important to my mother." "What did you want?" No one had asked her that in years. "I wanted to travel," she said finally. "I wanted to see places I'd only read about in books, mountains, oceans, cities that weren't just bigger versions of the same small town I grew up in." She laughed, but it came out bitter. "Then I got married and Thomas got sick, and suddenly travel meant moving from our house to the hospital and back again." "You resent that?" "I don't know." The honesty surprised her. "I loved him. But sometimes I wonder what my life would have looked like if I'd been braver, if I'd left Kansas before I got married, if I'd chosen differently." Rowan set down his tools. "You can't live like that, wondering about other versions of your life. It'll drive you crazy." "I know." Vivian looked down at her hands. "But sometimes I can't help it." "Then stop trying to help it. Let yourself wonder. Let yourself be angry about what you didn't get." He picked up the hammer again. "But don't let it stop you from taking what's right in front of you now." The words hit harder than they should have. Vivian went back to work without answering. They finished the last window just as the sun set. Rowan packed up his tools while Vivian lit the lamps. The room looked different with the new frames. More solid, more real. "I'll come back tomorrow and finish the second window," Rowan said. "And I'll check that chimney. Make sure it's drawing right before winter hits." "You don't have to." "Margaret's paying me," he repeated. "And I want to make sure you don't freeze or burn the place down." He left before she could argue. Vivian locked the door behind him and stood in her cleaned, partially repaired schoolhouse. Through the new window, she could see Pine Ridge settling into night. Lamps flickered in windows. Smoke rose from chimneys. Somewhere a child laughed. She built a fire in the stove, cooked eggs from Anna's basket, and ate standing by the window watching the town. When she finished, she washed the plate and sat at the teacher's desk. Monday was 3 days away. She pulled out a piece of paper and started making a list of what she'd need. Books, slates, chalk, primers for the younger children, basic arithmetic tools. She had no idea if Pine Ridge had any of those things. But she'd figure it out. She had to, because 15 children were counting on her whether they knew it or not. And Vivian Hale had spent 6 months being counted out. She was done with that. Sunday arrived with church bells and the smell of pine smoke. Vivian woke early, dressed in her better dress, still wrinkled from the journey but cleaner than the alternative, and walked to the church at the north end of town. The building was small and plain, with rough-hewn benches and windows that let in more cold than light. People were already gathering when she arrived, families in their Sunday clothes, children fidgeting, men and women who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else but knew they had to show up anyway. Vivian found a seat in the back and tried to make herself invisible. It didn't work. A woman in the pew ahead turned around. "You're the new teacher." "Yes, Vivian Hale." "Martha Cooper. My boy James will be in your class." She looked Vivian over with sharp eyes. "You look young." "I'm 24. Like I said, young." Martha turned back around without elaborating. Vivian sat through the service, trying not to feel judged. The minister, a man in his 50s with a voice that could probably carry across the valley, spoke about perseverance and faith and enduring hardship. Standard sermon material, but he delivered it like he meant it. When it ended, people filed out into the cold morning. Vivian stood near the door, not sure whether to leave or introduce herself or just disappear. Margaret solved the problem by appearing at her elbow. "Walk with me," Margaret said. They walked away from the church, down a path that led toward the edge of town. Margaret moved slowly, favoring her left leg slightly. Up close, Vivian could see the lines around her cousin's eyes, the gray in her hair, the way her hands were scarred and calloused. "You settling in?" Margaret asked. "I think so. The schoolhouse is coming together. Rowan said you worked hard. That's good." Margaret stopped at a fence overlooking a meadow. "I want to be clear about something, Vivian. I gave you this job because your family and because Pine Ridge needs a teacher, but I won't keep you on if you're not good at it." Vivian had expected this. "I understand. Do you?" Margaret looked at her directly. "Because there's two ways this goes. Either you prove you can handle teaching these children, all of them, not just the easy ones, or you prove you can't. If it's the second, I'll pay your way somewhere else and we'll part as family, but I won't let you half-do this job." "I'm not going to half-do it. We'll see." Margaret's expression softened slightly. "I know what it's like to lose a husband, to have everything fall apart and have to build something from nothing. It's hard. It makes you question everything. You managed it. I did. But it took years, and there were days I wanted to quit." Margaret paused. "The difference is I didn't have a choice. This ranch was all I had. You've got options if this doesn't work out." "No," Vivian said quietly. "I really don't." Margaret studied her for a long moment. "Then I guess you'd better make it work." They walked back to town in silence. When they reached the schoolhouse, Margaret stopped. "Classes start tomorrow. You ready?" Vivian looked at the building. Her building, shabby and crooked, but hers. "As ready as I'll ever be." "Good enough." Margaret turned to leave, then paused. "And Vivian, don't try to be perfect. These kids don't need perfect. They just need someone who shows up." Then she was gone. Vivian spent the rest of the day preparing. She arranged the benches in rows, wrote the alphabet on the blackboard in her best handwriting, laid out the few supplies Anna had given her, slates and chalk mostly, a handful of worn primers. It wasn't enough, but it was what she had. When evening came, she sat at the teacher's desk and stared at the empty room. Tomorrow it would be full of children she'd never met, expecting her to teach them things she wasn't sure she remembered how to teach. She thought about Thomas, about how he used to tell her she worried too much, that things always worked out. He'd been wrong. But maybe that was the point. Maybe things didn't work out. Maybe you just worked at them until they did, or until you broke trying. Vivian pulled out Thomas's photograph and looked at his frozen smile. "I don't know what I'm doing," she told him, "but I'm doing it anyway." The image didn't answer. She put it away and went to bed. Book. Monday morning arrived cold and clear. Vivian woke before dawn and built the fire, made coffee, tried to eat breakfast and couldn't. Her stomach was twisted in knots. At 8 o'clock, she opened the door and waited. The first child arrived at 8:15, a boy who couldn't have been more than 6, brought by his mother who looked at Vivian with barely concealed skepticism. "This is Daniel," the woman said. "He don't read, don't write neither. You think you can teach him?" "I'll try," Vivian said. The woman grunted and left. Daniel stood in the doorway looking terrified. Vivian smiled at him. "Come in, Daniel. You can sit anywhere you want." He chose the bench closest to the door, ready to run. More children arrived. Anna's daughter Emma, 6 years old with her mother's red hair. James Cooper, the boy whose mother had called Vivian young. 2 brothers who looked identical and refused to speak. A girl so small Vivian wondered if she was even 5 yet. And Clara Bennett, who sat in the back and watched Vivian with those 2 old eyes. By 9 o'clock, she had 14 children ranging from 5 to 14 crammed into the benches. They stared at her. She stared back. "Good morning," Vivian said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I'm Miss Hale. I'll be your teacher." Silence. "I know some of you have been in school before. Some of you haven't. That's all right. We're going to start from the beginning." She turned to the blackboard. "Can anyone tell me what this letter is?" She pointed to the A she'd written. One hand went up. Emma Morrison. "Yes, Emma? That's A." "That's right. Very good." Vivian wrote a B next to it. "And this one?" Fewer hands this time. She worked her way through the alphabet, getting responses from about half the class. The other half sat silent, either too scared or too proud to admit they didn't know. When she finished, she turned back to face them. "Here's how this is going to work," she said. "Every day we'll spend the morning on reading and writing. Afternoons we'll do mathematics. I know some of you need to help your families with work. If you can only come for half a day, come for the morning. If you can stay all day, that's better." A boy in the middle raised his hand. "Yes, what's your name?" "Peter. Peter Larson." "Yes, Peter?" "My pa says reading's useless. Says it don't help you farm or cut timber." Vivian had expected this. "Your father's partly right. Reading won't plant your crops or fell your trees. But it will help you read contracts so people can't cheat you. It'll help you write letters to family who live far away. It'll help you understand the world outside this valley." She paused. "And it'll give you choices. That's what reading does. It gives you options your father might not have had." Peter considered this. "He won't like it. Probably not. But you're here now, so we might as well make it worth your while." A few of the children smiled. Vivian felt something ease in her chest. She spent the rest of the morning working through basic letters with the younger children, while giving the older ones simple reading passages from the primers. It was chaos. Some kids caught on quickly. Others stared at the slate like it was written in a foreign language. Clara Bennett sat in the back reading a primer that was clearly too easy for her, boredom written all over her face. At noon, Vivian called a break. The children scattered like startled birds, some running home for lunch, others pulling food from bags and eating outside in the cold. Clara stayed. She walked to the front where Vivian was erasing the blackboard. "That was too easy," Clara said. Vivian turned. "I know. So why am I here?" "Because you're 13 and you should be in school." Vivian set down the chalk. "But you're right, the primers are too simple for you. What have you read?" Clara shrugged. "Everything I could get my hands on. Mrs. Morrison loans me books sometimes. I've read Shakespeare, Dickens, some poetry." "And mathematics?" "I can do basic arithmetic. Never learned geometry or algebra, though." Vivian studied her. "What do you want to learn?" The question seemed to surprise Clara. "What? If you could learn anything, what would it be?" Clara was quiet for a moment. "Medicine. I want to understand how bodies work, how to heal people." "That's ambitious." "I know. And it's stupid because there's no way I could ever eat." "It's not stupid," Vivian interrupted. "It's difficult. Those are different things." She thought for a moment. "I don't know medicine, but I can teach you advanced mathematics and science, chemistry, biology, the kind of knowledge you'd need before medical school." Clara's eyes widened. "Medical school? Why not? You're smart. You're motivated. The only question is whether you're willing to work harder than everyone else in this room." "I am." "Then starting tomorrow, you'll have different assignments than the other students. More difficult ones. I expect them completed." Vivian met her eyes. "And Clara? Don't tell the other children I'm going easy on you because I'm not. I'm making it harder. Understood?" Clara nodded slowly. "Understood." When she left, Vivian sat down at her desk and put her head in her hands. One day down. She'd survived one day. The afternoon was more of the same, basic arithmetic with the younger children, harder problems for the older ones. By 3 o'clock, Vivian's voice was hoarse and her head ached. When she finally dismissed them, the children filed out talking and laughing, already forgetting she existed. Except Clara, who lingered. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for not treating me like I'm stupid for wanting something impossible." "It's not impossible," Vivian said. "Just hard." Clara smiled, small and uncertain, but real. Then she was gone too. Vivian locked the door and walked to the general store to buy coffee. Anna was behind the counter. "You survived," Anna said. "Barely." "That's all you need to do. Survive one day at a time." Anna wrapped the coffee. "Emma won't stop talking about you. Says you're the smartest person she's ever met." "I'm really not." "Maybe not. But you showed up. Around here, that counts for something." Anna handed her the package. "On credit. Margaret's account." Vivian took it. "Thank you." She walked back to the schoolhouse as the sun dropped toward the mountains. Inside, she built a fire and made coffee and sat at the teacher's desk staring at the empty benches. Tomorrow she'd do it again. And the day after that. And the day after that. It felt overwhelming. It felt possible. Someone knocked. Vivian opened the door to find Rowan standing there with a box under one arm. "Margaret sent this. Books for the school." He handed her the box. Primers, mostly. Some basic mathematics texts. Vivian took it. The weight of it felt significant. "Tell her thank you." "Tell her yourself. She's expecting you for dinner Sunday." He turned to go, then stopped. "I heard you did well today." "Who told you that?" "Margaret. She heard it from Anna, who heard it from Emma." He almost smiled. "Small town. Word travels." "I didn't do anything special. I just taught." "That's more than the last 6 teachers managed." Rowan looked at her. "You're going to be all right here, Vivian." "You don't know that." "No, but I believe it anyway." Then he left. Vivian carried the box inside and opened it. Books. Real books with real pages. She laid them out on her desk and felt something settle in her chest. She could do this. Maybe not perfectly. Maybe not easily. But she could do it. Outside, Pine Ridge settled into night, and inside her crooked schoolhouse, Vivian Hale started planning tomorrow's lessons. The weeks fell into a rhythm that surprised Vivian with its steadiness. Wake before dawn, build the fire, prepare lessons. Teach through the morning while her voice grew hoarse. Break for lunch, teach through the afternoon until her feet ached. Evening spent grading work by lamplight and planning for tomorrow. It was exhausting. It was the most purpose she'd felt in years. October faded into November. The aspens turned gold and then bare. Morning frost stayed later each day, and the children, slowly, stubbornly, began to learn. Daniel could write his name now. Emma was reading simple sentences. The identical brothers turned out to be named Thomas and William. And once they started talking, Vivian couldn't get them to stop. Even Peter Larson, whose father insisted reading was useless, showed up every morning and worked harder than anyone. And Clara consumed knowledge like she was starving for it. Vivian gave her advanced assignments, geometry, basic chemistry, anatomy texts borrowed from the only doctor in Pine Ridge. Clara devoured them all and came back asking for more. "Where did you learn this?" Clara asked one afternoon, pointing to a chemistry equation Vivian had written out for her. "School." "Before I got married." Vivian sat down at the bench beside her. The other students had left. "I wanted to keep studying, but it wasn't practical." "Because you were a woman." "Because I was a woman," Vivian agreed. "And because my family needed me to work. And because Thomas proposed, and I said yes." She paused. "I don't regret marrying him, but sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd said not yet." Clara stared at the equation. "My mother says wanting more than you got is a good way to be miserable." "Your mother might be right." "But you're teaching me anyway." "Yes." "Why?" Vivian thought about it. "Because someone should have taught me, and because you deserve the chance I didn't take." Clara's jaw tightened. "What if I can't do anything with it? What if I learn all this and end up married to some rancher's son, having babies and cooking meals and never using any of it?" "Then at least you'll know," Vivian said. "You'll know what's possible, and maybe that'll be enough." "That's a terrible answer." "I know." Vivian stood. But it's the only one I've got. Clara went back to her work without another word. That evening, Vivian walked to the general store for supplies. Anna was restocking shelves, her daughter Emma helping by handing up cans. "Miss Hale," Emma called. "I read a whole book yesterday. Ma said I could tell you." "That's wonderful, Emma." "Which book?" "The one about the rabbit. It was sad at the end, but I liked it." Vivian smiled. "I'm glad." Anna climbed down from the stepladder. "She's been reading everything she can get her hands on. Drives me crazy at bedtime," but she said it with pride. "You need anything?" "Just coffee, and chalk if you have it." "I got both." Anna gathered the items. "You hear about the storm coming?" Vivian's stomach tightened. "No." "Big one. 3, maybe 4 days out. First real winter storm of the season." Anna wrapped the supplies. "You got enough wood stocked?" "I think so." "Make sure. And get extra food. Town might be snowed in for a week once it hits." Vivian paid and walked back through the cold evening. The sky was clear, stars already visible, but the air had that particular bite that promised snow. She could smell it coming, sharp and metallic. Back at the schoolhouse, she checked her wood supply. Enough for maybe 3 days if she was careful, not enough if the storm lasted longer. She was stacking what she had when someone knocked. Rowan stood outside with an armload of firewood. "Margaret sent me," he said. "Figured you'd need this." "I was just thinking that." Vivian stepped aside to let him in. "How bad is the storm supposed to be?" "Bad enough." He stacked the wood neatly by the stove. "Could dump 2 feet. Maybe more if it stalls over the valley." He straightened and looked at her. "You ever been through a real mountain winter?" "No?" "It's different than what you're used to. Cold that goes through you. Snow that doesn't melt for months. Days where you can't see 10 feet outside your door." He paused. "Some people don't handle it well." "I'll handle it." "You keep saying that." "Because I keep meaning it." Vivian crossed her arms. "When does it start?" "Thursday night, probably. Maybe Friday morning." Rowan moved toward the door. "Keep the fire going. Don't try to go anywhere if the snow's coming down hard. And if you need anything, Margaret's ranch is about a mile north. Follow the road and you'll find it." "I'll be fine." He looked at her for a long moment. "You know, most people would be scared." "I am scared," Vivian admitted. "But I've been scared before. It doesn't change anything." Something shifted in Rowan's expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "No," he said quietly. "I guess it doesn't." After he left, Vivian stood by the window watching Pine Ridge settle into night. Somewhere out there, a storm was building. She could feel it in the air, in the way the wind had changed direction, in the nervous energy of the town. She thought about Thomas, about how he used to hate storms. He'd sit up through thunder and lightning, unable to sleep, always convinced something terrible was going to happen. Usually nothing did. But then the fever came and he was right after all. Vivian pulled the curtain closed and went to bed. Amidst. Thursday arrived with gray skies and a wind that cut like glass. Vivian taught through the morning, but the children were restless. They kept looking at the windows, watching the clouds build. At noon, parents started arriving early to take their children home. "Storm's coming sooner than expected," one father said. "We're heading back before it hits." By 1 o'clock, only Clara remained. "Your mother's not coming?" Vivian asked. "She knows I can walk home myself." Clara was finishing a mathematics problem, her concentration absolute. "I want to get this done first." "Clara, you should go. 5 more minutes." Vivian let her work. Outside, the first snowflakes started to fall, lazy and fat, drifting down without urgency. But the wind was picking up. She could hear it whistling through the window frames Rowan had fixed. Clara finally set down her pencil. "Done. Show me tomorrow." "Will there be school tomorrow?" Vivian looked at the snow, coming faster now. "Probably not." Clara gathered her things. At the door, she paused. "Miss Hale? Thank you for the extra work, for believing I can do it." "You can do it, Clara. Don't forget that." The girl smiled and disappeared into the snow. Vivian locked the door and built up the fire. The temperature was already dropping. She could feel cold seeping through the walls, through the floorboards, through the gaps around the door. By evening, the snow was coming down hard. Vivian stood at the window watching it accumulate. 2 inches, then 4, then 6. The wind drove it sideways, piling it against buildings, erasing the streets. She'd never seen anything like it. Beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. She ate a cold dinner, bread and cheese, coffee, and tried to read by lamplight. But the wind kept howling, rattling the windows, making the whole building creak. Every sound made her think the roof was about to tear off. At some point she must have fallen asleep because she woke to someone pounding on the door. Vivian scrambled up, heart racing. The lamp had gone out. Outside it was fully dark, snow still falling in sheets. The pounding came again. She grabbed the fire poker, the only thing close to a weapon she had, and approached the door. "Who is it?" "It's Rowan. Open up." She unlocked the door and he pushed inside, covered in snow, his face red from cold. "What are you doing here?" Vivian demanded. "Making sure you're alive." He brushed snow off his coat. "Storm's worse than we thought. I came to check on you." "In this weather?" "I've been through worse." He looked around. "Fire's getting low. You need to keep it higher or you'll freeze." "I was asleep." "Well, you're awake now." He moved to the stove and started adding wood. "You got enough food?" "Yes." "Water?" "Yes." "Then you should be all right if you stay inside." He built the fire back up until it was roaring. "But Vivian, I mean it. Don't go out in this. People die in weather like this. Get turned around, can't find their way home, freeze 10 feet from their own door." "I understand." He straightened and looked at her. Snow was melting in his hair, dripping onto his shoulders. "You're really not scared." "I told you I was scared." "No. You told me you've been scared before. That's different." He moved toward the door. "Storm should break by tomorrow night, maybe the day after. Keep the fire going and you'll be fine." "Rowan," Vivian stopped him. "Thank you for checking on me." He nodded once. "Get some sleep." Then he was gone, back into the storm. Vivian locked the door and stood listening to the wind. The fire crackled, warm and bright. Outside, the world had disappeared into white. She climbed back into bed and pulled the blankets tight. Sleep came slowly. Encampment. The storm lasted 3 days. Vivian spent them reading, planning lessons, and keeping the fire fed. She watched snow pile against the windows until she couldn't see out. She listened to the wind scream and the building groan and tried not to think about what would happen if the roof collapsed. It didn't collapse. On the 3rd day, the wind stopped. Vivian woke to silence so complete it felt wrong. She pushed aside the curtain and stared. Snow covered everything, 3 feet at least, maybe more in the drifts. Pine Ridge looked like a different town, all softness and curves, the sharp edges buried. And the sky was blue, clear and cold and impossible after days of gray. Vivian, dressed in layers, pushed open the door, it stuck in the snow, and stepped outside. The cold hit her like a fist. She gasped, breath freezing in the air. But the sun was out and the world was blindingly white and beautiful in a way that made her chest ache. She heard digging. Down the street, people were out with shovels, clearing paths between buildings. Children were already playing, throwing snow, shrieking with laughter. Anna appeared from the direction of the store, trudging through knee-deep snow. "You survived," Anna called. "Barely." That's more than can be said for the Johnsons' chicken coop. Whole thing collapsed. Anna reached the schoolhouse. "No school today, obviously. Probably not tomorrow either. Roads are completely buried. Is everyone all right?" "Mostly. Old Mr. Peterson's roof caved in, but he wasn't under it. And the Larson boy broke his arm sledding, but that's his own fault." Anna glanced at the schoolhouse. "You need help digging out?" "I can manage." "Don't be stupid. I'll send Emma's father over with a shovel." Anna started back toward town, then stopped. "And Vivian? You did good. Most teachers would have panicked their first big storm. You just kept quiet and dealt with it." She left before Vivian could respond. An hour later, Anna's husband showed up with a shovel and helped dig a path from the schoolhouse to the main road. He was a quiet man who worked efficiently and left without expecting conversation. Vivian spent the afternoon shoveling snow away from her door and windows. Her hands blistered, her back screamed, but the work felt good, purposeful. When she finally stopped, exhausted, someone was walking up the newly cleared path. "Margaret." "You made it," Margaret said. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "I didn't know." Margaret looked her over. "But you're still here. That says something. Anna's husband helped dig me out. I know. I sent him. Margaret brushed snow off the porch railing. Storm's over, but winter's just starting. It'll get colder, harder. You sure you want to stay? Vivienne thought about the past 3 days. The fear. The cold. The cold. The absolute isolation of being trapped in a small room while the world tried to bury her. I'm sure, she said. Margaret studied her. You're tougher than I gave you credit for. I had good motivation. What's that? Nowhere else to go. Vivienne smiled without humor. Turns out that makes you pretty resilient. Yeah. Margaret turned to leave, then paused. Dinner Sunday. Don't forget. I won't. Margaret walked back toward her ranch, moving carefully through the snow. Vivienne watched her go and felt something settle in her chest. She'd survived her first storm. She could survive the rest. School resumed on Monday. Not all the children came. Some roads were still impassable, but enough showed up that Vivienne could teach. They were loud and energetic, full of stories about the storm, about what they'd done, about whose roof collapsed or whose chickens escaped. Vivienne let them talk for the first hour. Then she got them back to work. Clara arrived late, breathing hard, her face red from cold. Sorry, she said. Had to help dig out the barn first. It's fine, sit down. Clara slid into her usual seat and pulled out her work. She'd completed all the assignments Vivienne had given her before the storm. The mathematics was perfect. The chemistry notes were thorough. This is good work, Vivienne said during the lunch break. It kept me busy during the storm. Better than going crazy staring at walls. Clara paused. Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you ever regret it, coming here? Vivienne thought about that. Sometimes, when it's hard or when I'm lonely or when I wonder if I'm actually making a difference. So yes. No, because regret and doubt are different things. Vivienne set down Clara's work. Regret is wishing you'd made a different choice. Doubt is wondering if your choice will work out. I doubt all the time, but I don't regret coming here. Why not? Because the alternative was worse, and because for the first time in a long time I feel like I'm doing something that matters. She paused. You matter, Clara. All of you do, and that's enough. Clara looked down at her hands. Nobody's ever told me that before, that I matter. Then they should have. That evening, Vivienne walked to Margaret's ranch for dinner. The path was clear now, packed snow crunching under her boots. The sky was that particular shade of blue that came right before sunset, deep and cold and endless. Margaret's house was warm and smelled like roasted meat. Rowan was there, sitting at the table drinking coffee. He nodded when Vivienne entered. You survived the storm, he said. You keep checking on that. Keeps being worth checking. They ate together. Margaret, Rowan, Rosa the housekeeper, and Vivienne. The conversation was easy, practical. Talk about the storm damage, about which families needed help, about the cattle and how they'd weathered the weather. After dinner, Margaret and Rosa cleaned up while Rowan and Vivienne stood on the porch watching night settle over the valley. Can I ask you something? Vivienne said. You always do. Why do you eat here? At Margaret's house? Rowan was quiet for a moment. I've got a cabin about 2 miles north. It's fine for sleeping, but eating alone every night gets old. He paused. Margaret started inviting me years ago. Said it was stupid for me to cook for one when she was cooking anyway. Eventually, it just became routine. You're family to her. I guess so. As close as I've got anyway. He looked at Vivienne. What about you? You got family besides Margaret? No. My parents died before I got married. Thomas was an only child. His parents didn't approve of me. She smiled without humor. Thought I was too ambitious for a wife. Turned out they were wrong. I gave up everything to take care of Thomas. You think that was a mistake? I think it was complicated. I loved him, but I also lost myself. Vivienne pulled her shawl tighter. Coming here, it's the first time in years I've felt like I exist outside of being someone's widow. Rowan didn't respond right away. When he did, his voice was careful. You're good at this. Teaching. Taking care of those kids. Building something from nothing. I'm not building anything. I'm just showing up. That's the same thing. Vivienne looked at him. In the lamplight from inside, his face was half in shadow. She'd spent weeks traveling with this man, working beside him, accepting his help without really knowing him. "Can I ask you something else?" she said. "Seems to be your habit." "Why do you help me?" "Really?" Rowan considered the question. "Told you before? Margaret gave me a chance when nobody else would. Figure I should pass that on." "That's not all of it." "No." He met her eyes. "It's not." The silence stretched between them, heavy with things unspoken. "I should get back," Vivian said finally. "Early morning tomorrow. I'll walk you." "You don't have to." "I know." They walked through the cold night, their breath visible in the air. Above them, stars covered the sky, so thick they looked like snow themselves. At the schoolhouse, Rowan stopped. "Vivian," he seemed to struggle with something. "You're doing good here. Better than good. Don't let anybody tell you different." "Thank you." He nodded and turned to go. "Rowan?" He stopped. "I'm glad you found me. At that station in Dry Mesa. I'm glad you said yes." His expression shifted, something raw crossing his face before he controlled it. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Me too." Then he walked away into the darkness. Vivian went inside and built up the fire. She sat at her desk and tried to grade papers, but couldn't concentrate. Something had changed. She couldn't name it, couldn't define it, but it was there. A shift in the air between them, in the way he'd looked at her, in the words he hadn't said. She thought about Thomas, about the guilt that came with even thinking about another man, about whether 6 months was too soon or too late, or if there was even a right timeline for this kind of thing. Outside, the night was cold and clear. Inside, Vivian sat alone and let herself wonder what it might be like to not be alone. December arrived with more snow and shorter days. The children learned. Clara consumed every book Vivian could find. And slowly, carefully, Vivian built something resembling a life. She had Sunday dinners with Margaret. She bought supplies from Anna and listened to town gossip. She attended church and tried not to notice the way some of the women looked at her, like they were waiting for her to fail or leave or prove their suspicions right. And Rowan kept showing up. He fixed things that broke. He brought firewood when she ran low. He helped her repair desks and clean the chimney and a dozen other small tasks that he claimed Margaret was paying him for, but that Vivian suspected he would have done anyway. They didn't talk about what he'd almost said that night on the porch, but it hung between them. One evening in mid-December, Vivian was locking up the schoolhouse when he appeared. "Got something to show you," he said. "What?" "Come on." She followed him through the snow to the edge of town where the forest started. There, in a small clearing, was the most perfect pine tree she'd ever seen, maybe 10 feet tall, its branches heavy with snow. "I thought you could use it," Rowan said. "For the schoolhouse, for the children." "A Christmas tree?" "If you want." Vivian stared at it. "I don't have decorations." "We'll make some. Pine cones, paper, whatever works." He pulled an axe from his belt. "That is, if you want it." She thought about the children, about Daniel and Emma and Clara and all the others, about giving them something beautiful to remember when the winter felt endless. "I want it," she said. They cut it down together and dragged it back to the schoolhouse. It took both of them to get it through the door and upright in the corner. Rowan secured it with wire while Vivian watched. When it was standing, they stepped back. It was crooked, too big for the space, shedding needles everywhere. It was perfect. "Thank you," Vivian said. Rowan looked at her. His eyes were gray and serious and holding something she was afraid to name. "Vivian, don't." She stopped him. "Whatever you're about to say, don't." "Why not?" "Because I can't. Not yet. Maybe not ever." She wrapped her arms around herself. "Thomas has only been dead 6 months. 6 months. And I know that doesn't seem like much, but it's all I have. And if I let myself feel something for someone else right now, I'll fall apart. You won't. You don't know that." "No." Rowan stepped closer. "But I know you're stronger than you think. And I know I've been waiting to say this since I found you on that platform in Dry Mesa looking like the world had ended. And I'm tired of not saying it. Rowan, I love you." The words hit like a physical blow. Vivian stood there, the Christmas tree behind her, this man in front of her, and felt everything inside her tear in different directions. "You can't," she whispered. "Too late. I already do." He didn't move closer, didn't touch her, just stood there with his heart in his eyes. "And I'm not asking you to love me back. I'm not asking you for anything. I just needed you to know." "Why?" "Because I'm tired of pretending. Because life's too short to keep everything locked up." He paused. "And because you deserve to know that somebody sees you, really sees you. Not the widow, not the teacher. You." Vivian felt tears burning her eyes. "I can't do this." "I know. I'm not ready. I know that too." Rowan backed toward the door. "But whenever you are, if you ever are, I'll be here, waiting." Then he left. Vivian stood alone in the schoolhouse with the crooked Christmas tree and let herself cry. For Thomas, for Rowan, for herself, for the impossible choice between honoring the past and reaching for the future. Outside, snow began to fall again. And inside, Vivian Hale finally admitted the truth she'd been running from since the day Rowan had found her stranded and desperate and chose to help anyway. She loved him too, and that terrified her more than any storm ever could. The days after Rowan's confession blurred together in a haze of avoidance and guilt. Vivian threw herself into teaching with desperate focus, as if keeping busy enough would make the feelings go away. She stayed late at the schoolhouse grading papers that didn't need grading. She planned lessons weeks in advance. She reorganized the bookshelf 3 times. None of it helped. The Christmas tree stood in the corner, a constant reminder of what he'd said. The children decorated it with paper chains and pine cones tied with string. They brought small treasures from home: a carved wooden star, a faded ribbon, a tin angel with one wing bent. Every addition made it more beautiful and made Vivian's chest ache harder. She avoided Sunday dinners at Margaret's, claiming she needed to prepare for the school's Christmas program. It wasn't entirely a lie, but it also meant she didn't have to sit across from Rowan and pretend everything was normal. Anna noticed first. "You look terrible," she said one afternoon when Vivian came in for supplies. "Thank you." "I'm serious. When's the last time you slept?" Vivian tried to remember. "I sleep. That's not what I asked." Anna leaned against the counter. "What's going on?" "Nothing." "Don't lie to me. You're a terrible liar." Anna studied her. "This about Rowan?" Vivian's hand stilled on the counter. "How did you—" "Small town, and I got eyes." Anna's voice softened. "He's been walking around looking like someone kicked him. You've been avoiding Margaret's house. Doesn't take a genius. It's complicated. It always is." Anna wrapped Vivian's purchases. "But running from it won't make it simpler." "I'm not running." "You're doing a pretty good impression of it." Vivian paid and left without answering. That night she sat at her desk staring at Thomas's photograph. His frozen smile looked back at her, forever young, forever sick, forever gone. "I don't know what to do," she told him. "I loved you, I still love you. But he's here, and you're not. And I don't know if that makes me terrible, or practical, or just human." The photograph didn't answer. It never did. Vivian put it face down in the drawer and went to bed. The school's Christmas program was set for December 23rd. The children had been practicing for weeks. Simple songs, a short play about winter, recitations from students who could read well enough. It gave them something to work toward, and gave Vivian something to focus on besides the mess inside her head. Clara had written a poem about the mountains. She practiced it every day, her voice getting stronger and more confident. "You're sure it's good enough?" Clara asked for the 10th time. "It's better than good enough. It's excellent." "What if people think it's stupid?" "Then they're wrong." Vivian looked at her. "Clara, you're the smartest student I've ever taught. Trust yourself." Clara nodded, but the doubt didn't leave her eyes. The day of the program arrived cold and clear. Parents started showing up an hour early, filling the benches, standing along the walls. The schoolhouse had never been so full. Vivian watched them come and felt panic rising in her throat. Margaret arrived with Rowan. He met Vivian's eyes across the room and nodded once, then found a spot in the back. He didn't try to approach, didn't try to talk to her. Somehow, that made it worse. The program started. Daniel recited the alphabet without a single mistake. Emma read a passage from a primer, her voice clear and proud. The twins sang a song about snow that was more enthusiasm than melody. And Clara stood in front of everyone and delivered her poem. It was about the mountains in winter, about cold and beauty and survival, about finding strength in places you didn't know you had it. When she finished, the room was silent for a heartbeat. Then someone started clapping. Others joined. Within seconds, the whole schoolhouse was applauding. Clara's face went bright red, but she was smiling. Vivian felt tears burning her eyes. After the program ended, parents crowded around thanking her, complimenting their children, promising they'd be back after the holiday break. Anna hugged her. Margaret shook her hand and said, "You did well." And Rowan left without saying a word. Vivian watched him go and felt something crack inside her chest. That evening, after everyone had gone and the schoolhouse was empty except for the Christmas tree and the decorations the children had left behind, Vivian sat at her desk and finally let herself break. She cried for Thomas, for the life they'd never gotten to have, for the guilt of wanting something new when the old hadn't been dead long enough. She cried for Rowan, for the patient, steady way he'd waited for her, for the words he'd said that she couldn't unhear. And she cried for herself, for being so tired of being alone, for being so scared of not being alone, for not knowing how to reconcile loving someone who was gone with loving someone who was here. When the tears finally stopped, she felt hollow, empty, but also, strangely, lighter. She stood and walked to the Christmas tree. In the lamplight, the decorations glowed, simple and imperfect, and made with care. The children had created this. Together, each one contributing what they could. That's what life was, Vivian realized. Imperfect pieces cobbled together, sometimes beautiful despite themselves. She thought about what Clara had said in her poem, about finding strength in unexpected places. Maybe that included finding love there too. Vivian took a breath, locked up the schoolhouse, and walked through the cold night toward Margaret's ranch. The house was lit when she arrived, smoke rising from the chimney. Vivian knocked before she could lose her nerve. Rosa answered, "Miss Vivian, it's late." "I know. I need to talk to Rowan. Is he here?" "In the barn, checking on a horse that's been sick." Vivian walked around to the barn. Inside, it was warmer, heated by the animals, and insulated hay. She found Rowan in a stall at the back, kneeling beside a mare, running his hands along her leg. "She'll be all right," he was saying quietly. "Just needs rest." Vivian cleared her throat. Rowan looked up. For a second, surprise crossed his face. Then it smoothed into that careful blankness he wore when he was protecting himself. "Vivian, can we talk?" He stood slowly. "If you want." They walked outside where the air was cold enough to hurt, and the stars were so bright they looked unreal. "The program was good," Rowan said. "Those kids have come a long way." "They have." Vivian wrapped her arms around herself. "Rowan, I need to say something. You don't owe me anything." "Yes, I do. I owe you honesty." She forced herself to meet his eyes. "I've been avoiding you because I didn't know what to say, because you told me you loved me and I didn't know how to handle that. I shouldn't have said it." "No, you should have." Vivian took a breath. "Because it made me face something I've been running from since Thomas died. Maybe even before that." Rowan waited. "I loved my husband," Vivian said. "I did. But our marriage wasn't perfect. He was sick for so long that I spent the last year of his life being a nurse instead of a wife. And before that," she paused. "Before that, I think I loved the idea of marriage more than I loved the reality of it. Does that make sense?" "Yeah, it does. When he died, I thought my life was over. I thought I was supposed to grieve forever, that moving on meant I hadn't loved him enough." Her voice cracked. "But these past months here, teaching, building something, being around you, I felt more alive than I have in years, and I don't know if that means I'm healing or if it means I'm betraying him." "It means you're living," Rowan said quietly. "That's all." "Is it?" Vivian felt tears on her cheeks. "Because it feels more complicated than that." Rowan stepped closer. Not touching, just close enough that she could see his face clearly in the starlight. "You want to know what I think?" he asked. "Yes. I think the dead don't want us to stop living for them. I think they'd want us to keep going, keep finding joy where we can, Keep building lives worth living. He paused. And I think you've been punishing yourself for surviving when Thomas didn't. But Vivian, you didn't choose to survive. You just did. And that's not something you need to feel guilty about. The words hit her like a punch, because he was right. She'd been carrying guilt like it was a required burden, like suffering was how you proved you'd loved someone. I'm scared, she whispered. Of what? Of this. Of you. Of letting myself feel something real and losing it again. She looked at him. I don't know if I can survive that twice. You can, Rowan said, because you're the strongest person I've ever met. But I'm not asking you to survive anything. I'm just asking you to try. Try what? Living. Actually living instead of just surviving. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he took her hand. I love you, Vivian. I'm not going anywhere, and I'll wait as long as you need. But at some point, you're going to have to decide whether you want to keep hiding behind grief or step into something new. Vivian looked at their joined hands. His was rough and calloused and warm. Real. I think I already decided, she said. Yeah, she met his eyes. I love you too. I don't know when it started. Maybe on that wagon ride north. Maybe the first time you fixed my windows. Maybe the second you showed up at that train station and said you'd been looking for me. She squeezed his hand. But I do, and it terrifies me. And I need you to be patient while I figure out how to do this. Rowan's face transformed. Not a smile exactly, but something close. Something real. I can be patient, he said. Good. Because I'm going to be terrible at this. Probably. He pulled her closer. But we'll figure it out. They stood there in the cold with the stars overhead and the mountains dark around them. Rowan wrapped his arms around her, and Vivian let herself lean into it. Let herself feel safe. Let herself believe that maybe, possibly, this could work. Inside the house, a lamp flickered. Through the window, Vivian could see Margaret watching them. When their eyes met, Margaret nodded once and turned away. Permission, Vivian realized. Or maybe just acknowledgement that some things couldn't be stopped even if you wanted to. Come on, Rowan said. You're freezing. They walked back to the house together. Inside, Margaret had coffee waiting and Rosa had set out pie. They sat at the table like it was normal, like everything hadn't just shifted, like Vivian's whole world hadn't just rearranged itself. About time, Margaret said. Vivian blinked. You knew? Everyone knew. You two have been dancing around each other for months. Margaret cut the pie. I was starting to think I'd have to lock you both in a room until you figured it out. That's invasive. That's practical. Margaret handed her a plate. You planning to keep teaching? Of course. Good. Those kids need you. She looked at Rowan. And you keep your cabin or move into town? Haven't thought that far ahead yet, Rowan said. Well, think about it. Can't have my teacher living in sin. Margaret's mouth twitched. Causes talk. Vivian felt her face heat. We haven't yet, Margaret said. But you will. And when you do, make sure it's proper. I didn't fight this hard to build a respectable school just to have it ruined by gossip. Margaret, Rowan warned, I'm just saying. She ate her pie calmly. Now, Christmas is in 2 days. You're both coming here for dinner. No arguments. It wasn't a question. Das. Christmas arrived with fresh snow and clear skies. Vivian spent the morning at the schoolhouse, tidying up after the program, taking down decorations. The tree stood bare now, waiting to be removed. She'd leave that for Rowan. She was sweeping when Clara appeared. Miss Hale, can I talk to you? Of course, come in. Clara stepped inside, clutching something wrapped in cloth. I wanted to give you this, for Christmas. She handed it to Vivian. Inside was a small journal, handmade, the pages bound with careful stitching. I made it, Clara said. For you, for lesson plans or notes or whatever you want. Ma helped with the binding. Vivian felt her throat tighten. Clara, this is beautiful. It's not much. It's perfect. Vivian hugged her. Thank you. Clara hugged back, quick and fierce. When she pulled away, her eyes were bright. Thank you, Clara said, for believing I could do more, for teaching me like I mattered. You do matter. I know, because you showed me. Clara stepped back. I'm going to keep studying, even if I can't go to medical school, even if I end up doing something else. I'm going to keep learning. Good. Don't stop. After Clara left, Vivian sat at her desk holding the journal. She opened it to the first page and wrote, Pine Ridge, December 25th. The children gave me hope today. I'm learning to accept it. She closed the journal and locked up the schoolhouse. At Margaret's ranch, the house smelled like roasted turkey and fresh bread. Rosa had outdone herself. The table was set for 4, Margaret, Rowan, Vivian, and one of the ranch hands who had nowhere else to go. They ate together, talking about the school, the ranch, plans for spring. It felt like family. Not perfect. Not what Vivian had imagined family would look like, but real. After dinner, Rowan walked her back to the schoolhouse. The night was cold but calm, the snow crunching under their feet. I got you something, Rowan said when they reached her door. Rowan, you didn't have to. He pulled a small wooden box from his pocket and handed it to her. Inside was a ring, simple silver with a small stone. Vivian stared at it. It's not fancy, Rowan said, but it's real. And I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I'm not asking you to marry me next month. I'm just asking you to think about it. When you're ready, if you're ever ready. Vivian picked up the ring. It caught the lamplight, glinting. You really want to marry a widow who barely knows how to be happy? Yeah, I really do. She looked at him, this man who'd found her at her lowest and chosen to help anyway, who'd been patient when she needed space, who'd been honest when she needed truth. Ask me in the spring, she said. Spring? Spring, when winter's over and I've had time to be sure. She held the ring. But Rowan? I'm already pretty sure. He smiled then, full and real. Spring it is. He kissed her, gentle and careful and full of promise. Vivian kissed him back and felt something inside her finally let go. Not Thomas. She'd never let go of Thomas. But the guilt, the fear, the belief that she didn't deserve this, that she could release. Spring came slowly to Pine Ridge. The snow melted in patches, revealing brown grass and mud. The streams swelled with runoff. The mountains stayed white at the peaks, but turned green lower down. Vivian taught through it all. Her 3-month trial period ended, and Margaret officially hired her permanently. The children thrived. Clara finished her advanced coursework and started preparing for examinations that might, just might, get her into a medical program somewhere. And Rowan showed up every day, steady and patient and present. In late March, when the aspens started budding and the air smelled like thaw, he asked her again. They were sitting on the schoolhouse porch, watching the sun set over the valley. You ready? He asked. Vivian thought about it, about everything she'd survived to get here, about Thomas and grief and guilt and learning to live anyway. Yes, she said. I'm ready. They married in April in the church at the north end of town. It was small, just Margaret and Anna and Rosa and the children and a few families from town. Clara read a poem she'd written for the occasion. Emma scattered wildflowers down the aisle. Vivian wore a simple dress that Anna had helped her sew. Rowan wore his best shirt and looked uncomfortable and happy in equal measure. And when the minister asked if she took this man, Vivian looked at Rowan and said yes without hesitation. After, they had dinner at Margaret's. The children ran wild outside. The adults sat on the porch drinking coffee and watching the mountains turn purple in the twilight. You did good, Margaret said to Vivian. At what? Teaching or getting married? Both, though I was talking about the teaching. Vivian smiled. The children did the work. I just showed up. That's all anyone can do. Show up and try. Margaret stood, wincing slightly. I'm getting old and tired, but I'm glad you're here, Vivian. Glad you stayed. Me too. After everyone left, Rowan and Vivian walked back to the schoolhouse. He'd moved his things in over the past week. Not much, just clothes and tools and a few books. The small room in the back was crowded now with 2 people's lives instead of 1. It felt perfect. You all right? Rowan asked. Vivian looked at the ring on her finger, at this man she'd married, at this life she'd built from nothing. I'm better than all right, she said, and she meant it. Summer turned the valley green and gold. Vivian kept teaching. She'd already planned lessons for the next year, already ordered new books, already started thinking about how to expand the school if enrollment grew. In June, she made a trip back to Dry Mesa. She hadn't planned to, but a supply run took her that direction, and curiosity pulled her the rest of the way. The town looked the same. The train station, the mercantile, the platform where she'd sat convinced her life was over. She stood there now, a different woman entirely. Sarah Chen found her standing by the platform. "Vivian Hale," Sarah said. Then she saw the ring. "Or is it Vivian Creed now?" "It is," Sarah smiled. "I heard you got married. Heard you're still teaching up in Pine Ridge, too." "I am. We both are. Rowan built an addition onto the schoolhouse. We live there together." "That's good. Real good." Sarah looked at her. "You came back to thank me?" "I came back because I needed to see it." "See what?" "The place where everything changed." Vivian looked at the platform. "I was so desperate when I got off that train, so sure I was finished." "But you weren't." "No, I wasn't." Vivian turned to Sarah. "But I also came back to tell you thank you for helping me, for giving me that chance." "I didn't do much." "You did everything." Vivian pulled something from her bag, a letter. "There's a woman in Pine Ridge, young. Husband died last winter. She's got nowhere to go and no money, and she needs work. I wrote down everything I know about her. If you hear of anything, any job, any opportunity, will you help her the way you helped me?" Sarah took the letter. "You passing it on?" "Trying to." "That's good. That's right." Sarah tucked the letter in her apron. "You take care, Vivian Creed." "You too." Vivian walked back to where Rowan was waiting with the wagon. He looked at her, a question in his eyes. "I'm ready," she said. They headed north, back toward Pine Ridge, back toward home. As they climbed into the mountains, Vivian looked back one last time at Dry Mesa shrinking in the distance, at the platform where her old life had ended. And then she looked forward, toward the valley, toward the school, toward Rowan beside her, and the life they were building together. Being left behind, she'd learned, wasn't the end of anything. Sometimes it was just the beginning of everything else. The life you didn't plan, the love you didn't expect, the strength you didn't know you had. Pine Ridge appeared in the distance, small and imperfect, and hers. Vivian smiled. She was home. And for the first time in as long as she could remember, that was exactly where she wanted to be. The wagon rolled on toward the future, carrying two people who'd both been broken in different ways and had somehow, against all odds, found a way to be whole together. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that was enough.